Some of the very best episodes of Batman the Animated Series are the ones where Batman barely shows up at all. That might sound counterintuitive for a show with his name on it, but it's one of the series' strengths. Batman's presence is so strong that it's still felt, even when he's not in the room. And the episode P.O.V. is a perfect example of this. Now, granted, this isn't the very best episode, but it's still a thrilling story about potential police corruption, with no costumed criminal threatening the city, and Batman's barely in it. This is as close as the series gets to a police procedural drama, where the focus shifts away from capes and gadgets and onto a small group of police officers that have come off of a bust gone wrong. In episodes like this, Batman becomes less of a lead character and more of a gravitational force, bending everything around him. P.O.V. understands that idea completely. Batman is present at times, but rarely central. He certainly doesn't say very much. For the majority of the episode, Batman is more of a half-remembered figure described under interrogation lights. The story is driven by how he is perceived by the three officers. Each version of events reshapes him, turning the same man into a menace, a miracle, or a fellow professional depending on who's speaking. By pulling Batman into the background, the episode allows Gotham's police to take center stage. Their anxieties, egos, and assumptions become the real engine of the story. That's why POV works so well. It isn't great in spite of Batman's limited screen time. I'd argue that it's great because of it. When Batman steps back, other characters are given the chance to shine. Now, this episode borrows very heavily from the film Rashomon, in which eyewitnesses with different accounts of a murder share their stories, and it's up to the audience to decide who is telling the truth. POV, meanwhile, is mostly about a disastrous raid that results in a factory burning down and the criminals getting away with the loot. Unlike Rashomon, we are shown exactly what happened, and we can tell when characters are lying or they are simply mistaken. The three officers, slovenly Detective Harvey Bullock, newbie Officer Wilkes, and the enthusiastic by-the-books Officer Montoya are interrogated by Lieutenant Hackle from Internal Affairs while Commissioner Gordon looks on. Hackle believes that at least one of the officers intentionally sabotaged the raid to steal the money, but he's not sure who. The interrogation scenes act as the episode's backbone. Stripped of rooftops and chase music, the story unfolds under harsh lights, with 3 chairs, a table, and a man who already thinks he knows the answer. It's a clever bit of misdirection. The flashbacks provide a lot of action, but the real drama is happening in the present, where every pause, glance, and defensive gesture matters more than any explosion. Ultimately, Hackle isn't there to understand what happened, he is there to assign blame, close the file, and move on. The truth doesn't even seem to be all that important to him. Each officer knows that the wrong phrasing could end a career, so they are sincere in what they say. The episode structure reinforces that idea. We're shown the events of the night from the perspective of each officer. Bullock was first on the scene, and in his eagerness to catch the crooks, he ended up ruining everything. Montoya and Wilkes tried to pick up the pieces, but by that point it was too late. In Bullock's fistfight with the crooks, a fire was started, and he almost burnt to death. Thankfully, Batman arrived and saved his life, although Bullock repays him by blaming Batman for his own mistakes. And this is really psychologically revealing. First of all, Bullock went before his backup arrived, indicating confidence in his own abilities. But most importantly, he refuses to admit any mistakes, even though he has to know that he was the one who accidentally alerted the thieves. It's far easier for him to blame Batman than admit fault. There was a cut scene from this episode that would have talked about Bullock's youth, where his overbearing father had taught him that teamwork was for suckers, and that the only person he could rely on was himself. That was cut for time, as were several other scenes, and this has an impact on the episode overall, which I will get to in a moment. Following Bullock's dramatic rescue, Montoya and Wilkes arrive on the scene and split up to take out the thieves. Wilkes pursues the criminals that were seen leaving on foot, but they try to run him over. Batman drops in and takes out the tires with his weaponry, and from Wilkes' perspective it looks like Batman has fired sparks from his hands to blow out the tires, and simply gestured towards the truck door to blow it off. When Wilkes testifies to this, he does it with pure sincerity. We can see Batman's gadgets being used, but what this demonstrates is how Batman uses the shadows to misdirect witnesses. Unlike Bullock, Wilkes is not lying. We can completely understand where he's coming from, but we know that he is mistaken. So if Bullock is an arrogant liar and Wilkes is a naive rookie, then Montoya is the bastion of truth. During her scene, she heads into the burning building where the loot was being kept and tries to arrest the crooks. However, one of the men is armed with a massive drill that they had used to break into the safe, and he overpowers her. Once again, Batman returns to save the day. Now, there's a very interesting scene that was cut out from this fight. Initially, the script called for the man with the drill to menace Montoya with it. However, when broadcast standards and practices saw the scenes, they couldn't help but interpret a towering man thrusting a massive drill into wooden boxes to intimidate a woman as a metaphor for attempted sexual assault. Bruce Timm had described how that scene got them all in a lot of trouble. Of course, that wasn't their intention, and once that was pointed out, they were mortified and gladly cut the segment. But it does alter the pacing of the fight. Note how Batman just kind of drops in before anything can happen. And this has a knock-on effect to later parts of the episode. Regardless, in the struggle, the burning roof collapses, seemingly killing Batman. Upon hearing her story, Hackle suggests that Montoya may be lying, and she takes it personally. Again, another scene would have shown Montoya's childhood where she was deeply ashamed of being branded a liar, hence her rigid morality. But this too was cut for time. With the three officers' versions of events captured for the record, Hackle suspends the trio and has them hand over their badges and guns. There's some really solid character work on display in the way each of them acts. Wilkes is up first and mournfully hands over his badge and gun. Bullock casually flings his badge and slams down his gun, making his displeasure clear. We can tell that the law and order part of his job, represented by his badge, is less important to him than force, his gun. And Montoya can hardly believe what's happening. She hangs back almost as if the whole thing is a cruel joke and has to be told a second time. When she complies, she maintains eye contact with Hackle while he stands there, arms folded with his eyes closed, willfully blind to the situation. By the time the episode enters its final act, P.O.V. has already made its argument about truth, memory, and authority. Now, we all know that Batman hasn't really died, of course not, it's his show. Instead, the crooks kidnapped him for their boss. The police, ironically, don't solve the case by following procedure. The breakthrough comes because Montoya ignores it. Suspended, disarmed, and officially sidelined, she follows a lead. One of the criminals was overheard talking about a dock, and acts on her own. Without backup or clearance, she finds the location of the stolen loot and helps to save Batman. This is where the episode indicts rigid authority. After a series of fistfights, Montoya calls in backup to bring in the gang. Hackle arrives on the scene and objects on principle. She was suspended! It doesn't matter that the gang is captured or the money was recovered. What matters to him is that the rules were bent. Commissioner Gordon's response is indicative of his kind of policing. He doesn't argue the technicalities, instead he grabs Hackle by the collar, pulls him in close and tells him that the case is closed. And as far as he's concerned, the three officers are exonerated. He then reaches into Hackle's pocket and pulls out their confiscated badges and hands them back. As far as Gordon is concerned, results matter more than posturing, and justice matters more than optics. Now, I know that some critics have pointed out one hole in the plot around the leader of the gang. Throughout the episode, the criminals keep referring to their boss as if he's someone important enough to stay off screen. Someone powerful enough to watch events unfold from a distance, and someone we may recognise. The story treats his identity like a secret worth withholding, and then when the moment comes, that secret simply evaporates. Montoya catches the boss and he is nobody. Unarmed, faceless, and completely interchangeable. Interestingly, the episode originally intended for Hackle to be revealed as the criminal's boss, tying authority and corruption together, which would explain why he was so enthusiastic about blaming the three officers. The twist was cut due to the prevailing morality of the time. Censors wouldn't allow the little kiddies to even think that the authorities could be bad. But I'd argue that this was still a wise move. It allows Batman to remain the central focal point of the story, rather than complicating things by bringing up hypocrisy, deception, and corruption. I also have to credit director Kevin Altieri for his role in streamlining the script, particularly trimming the clunky childhood flashbacks. His philosophy was simple: show, don't tell, and trust the audience to follow along. He was always willing to cut or rewrite scenes for the betterment of the episode. While this could frustrate the writers, in P.O.V. it sharpened the focus, letting Batman's influence remain the central force without distraction. By the time Batman resurfaces in the final act, he dominates the scene. He dismantles the criminals with precision and authority without undermining Montoya. His presence is brief but absolute and demonstrates why his influence can still be felt even when he's not around. The story shows that Batman doesn't need to dominate the screen time to shape the story. He doesn't even need to speak all that much because we already know who he is. His influence is felt in the way people lie, the way they remember, and the way they justify themselves under pressure. Montoya's decisive actions in the final act reflect the way Batman's principles ripple through Gotham. She improvises, acts courageously, and enforces justice in his absence. In this way, the episode shows that Batman doesn't need to be the one in every fight. His ethos guides those around him, even when he's off screen. P.O.V. clearly demonstrates how Batman works as an idea, not just a constant presence. By pushing him to the margins, the episode reveals what Gotham looks like when people are left alone with their consciences, their fears, and their versions of the truth. This shows us that Batman stories don't have to focus on what he does. They can be about what everyone else does when he isn't there, and that is just as valid. Okay, that's it for this essay. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really liked the video and feel like tossing a buck or two my way, please consider using the thanks button, because every little helps. And if you have really enjoyed my work, you might want to pick up a copy of my book, Rogues Gallery. It features 22 essays on villains from Batman the Animated Series. There's a beautiful cover by Batman the Animated Series background artist John Calmette, a foreword by director Dan Reber, and a moving segment from the late Kevin Conroy sharing his thoughts on life, love, and loss. Plus, an exclusive essay on the Condiment King that will never be made into a video. Rogues Gallery is available worldwide on Amazon, both digitally and in softcover. Finally, channel memberships are just $1.99 a month and give you early access to my essays, custom emojis, and your name featured on my members end screen, which has been rolling for a little while now. Huge thanks to everyone who's already part of this. You've helped to make these videos possible. If you want to see your name up here too, join the channel now. And while I have your attention, please consider checking out my other channel, Serum Lake Comics, where I talk about mostly DC comic books. Next time, I'll be back on Friday with another Batman the Brave and the Bold video, this time looking at a well-meaning ally of Batman's voiced by the late Adam West, who was just too big and clumsy. We're going to talk about Proto. And next Monday, I'm going back to Metropolis to discuss an early episode of Superman the Animated Series that took a goofy Golden Age supervillain with a toy gimmick and reimagined him as an obsessive, emotionally stunted creep. We're going to talk about the debut of Toyman in Fun and Games. Hope to see you then.